I'm Raheem Kazan, broadcasting live from Capitol Hill here in Washington, D.C., Wednesday the 29th of March 2017, what I'm calling Article 50 Day, when the British government has issued the letter to the European Union triggering the Article 50 process, the two-year process of leaving. 866-957-2874 is the number, 866-95-PATRIOT. We do have Gina Miller on the line. Gina Miller is an investment manager and business owner who has gone toe-to-toe with the British government on a number of issues now regarding the Brexit process. And I think it's fair to say we'll offer a counterweight to me and my Brexit excitement today. Gina, good morning, and thanks for joining us here.
Hello, good morning.
Gina, wonderful to speak to you, and thank you for joining us. I read with interest your article on the Independent website today, and I wanted to ask, because I am genuinely interested in the other side's perspective, and obviously, you know, people like me and people like Nigel Farage, we're all full steam ahead with this. Tell our audience a little bit about why perhaps you think that this process is problematic, and why I think you made the case that it's just not a long enough process for us to get a good deal.
I think you have to, one of the first things I'd say is you need to stop talking about which side, because we're actually all on the same side now. So the reality of where we are is that because of the domestic situation in two of the major member states, Germany and France, the hard-headed negotiations won't really start until sort of autumn. So that gives us 10 months to negotiate a deal that covers every area that we have been part of in Europe for over the last 44 years. So we've got 10 months to do that, which is totally impossible. So the only thing that's realistic at this point in time, in my view, is negotiating an interim or a transitional period, which will give us the time to negotiate as we go forward. Because reality is we only have 20 trained, experienced negotiators in the UK, because the majority of them now sit in the EU. So there are so many things that are just not practical when we look at an 18-month.
Is that why we waited 9 months to start the process, though, so that we could find those negotiators?
Yes, but we've only managed to find 20, which isn't a great number. But it's far more than that. It's the fact that we have to look at, every area of our legislation will need to be investigated. We have to look at things like the environmental regulation. We have to look at air traffic regulation. We have to look at road trade, manufacturing, services. The list goes on and on and on.
Gina, I'm glad you said what you did about the two sides thing, and I wrote about this this morning as well. I think you're absolutely correct. So would it be fair to say, and would you say, because of course a lot of people out there have seen you as a stopper, as somebody who's trying to stop the Brexit process, would it be fair to say now that we all acknowledge it is happening, and it's time for us all to work together in the national interest to make sure we get the best deal possible? Is that fair?
Well, I would throw it back to those individuals and say if they could just stop the emotions, because my case had nothing to do with stopping Brexit. It actually created the certainty for what's happening today. If they bothered to read and look at what I did, they might be a little bit more honest in their assessment of it. But
you can see why people might have been skeptical, can't you? I mean, you had the backing of people like Charlie Mullins, who these people remain campaigners.
No, I had Charlie managed to give me a few £1,000, which some other individuals are. I was not backed by anyone but myself. This case was brought by me and no one else. And the fact was, it was about the letter of the law. It was not about Brexit. It had implications. My case was much bigger than Brexit. It was about ensuring that a government could not act as an executive and issue orders whenever they liked by bypassing Parliament. That was my case. Nothing more.
Sure. And now that is behind us, and you had a success there. Can you issue the call to Eurosceptics who have been skeptical of you, that you are willing to work with them to get the best deal from this Article 50 process? Is that what you're saying?
I think everyone's got to work together. I think I absolutely agree with Mrs. May when she said it's got to be about all of us pulling together.
Yeah.
Because who wants a failing, on both sides, Who wants a failing neighbour? The EU should not want to see us fail, and we should not want to see the EU fail. That damages everyone.
Yeah, although there are some people out there who would say that they don't believe that the organisation is good for Italy, for Greece, even for larger nations like France, and that's a fair reading into it. I mean, they're allowed to have that opinion. Gina,
but no organisation is perfect, and the EU needs dramatic reform. There is no denying that.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, finally, just before I let you go, I wanted to ask, you have written, I mean, it's a thoughtful piece, and it bears reading on The Independent about the process here. Would you support, if negotiations go badly or don't go at all or hit a brick wall, would you support Britain just reverting to World Trade Organization rules, or do you think that if we can't get a good deal, we should actually try and reverse the Article 50 process and stay in the EU?
I think there are so many things. It might not even, as you said, be in the EU to negotiate with. If this process goes along 4 or 5 years, we just don't know. I think the only thing we can say is we have to have a reasoned, respectful negotiated process with all parties involved. And all options have to be on the table.
Well, Gina Miller, thank you so much for joining us here. I appreciate you've probably got a very busy day of media appearances and so forth, but we really appreciate it. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Bye-bye.
That was Gina Miller, the businesswoman who went toe-to-toe with the British government to try and thwart the executive branch issuing a blanket order for triggering Brexit, and was successful in that. 866-957-2874 is the number here. Let's bring in Ben Harris-Quinney, the chairman of the conservative-leaning Bow Group think tank. Ben, you heard all that. What do you think?
Well, actually, I supported what the findings of Gina Miller's court case delivered, which was that Parliament is sovereign, and that goes to many other things than Brexit, things that we've seen before, like the decision to go to war in Iraq. So actually, I think it was the right decision. I don't believe that Gina Miller and those people that were backing her were doing it for those reasons. I think they were trying to subvert the democratic will of the British people, but it actually turned out for the best, I think, in the end. The only thing I would say about what she just said is this idea of the arbitrary 2-year deadline that we've got in order to complete the process of leaving the European Union. I see no reason why we can't meet that deadline. But if we don't, it's only a piece of paper. We're not going to fall off a cliff. We may, for some time, operate under WTO rules, but...
Ben, I look at that, and I look at what she says there, and I think to myself, well, hold on a minute. These are the EU's own rules. This is what's in the Lisbon Treaty, and you guys were so keen on the Lisbon Treaty taking Britain into the EU. So you can't have it both ways. I'm surprised to hear you say that you thought Parliament was sovereign over the referendum, over the will of the British people, and then express that you believe in the will of the people. It can't be both, right? There was a referendum. You don't then need to go to Parliament to get that referendum then voted on by members of Parliament. The members of Parliament are there because they're put there by the people that voted in that referendum, Ben.
Well, we shouldn't have had to. Indeed, what the government said was the British people will vote and we will implement your decision. Unfortunately, that's not what the legislation said. So the British government made a mistake, and that's why the court found in the way that it did. But I think my point is that actually the real significance of the court case will not be to Brexit, because, as I said all throughout the process, and as we all said, Brexit's going to happen anyway. These people that are trying to stop it are like, Japanese people still fighting the Second World War in the 70s. It's over. We've won. We're going to have Brexit. But there will be decisions down the line that the UK government will have to make that I think it's better for Parliament to be able to scrutinise. We don't know what those decisions will be.
Let's bring this back. Let's bring this back around for our audience here, a predominantly US audience here, because we're getting into the minutiae of the parliamentary process and so forth. But actually, this is really interesting for an American audience because it means Britain has the ability now. And I began the show by saying, Britannia and Uncle Sam standing side by side. Where do you think Britain goes now as a trading nation and for bilateral deals? Will the Trump White House open a bilateral deal with Britain?
Of course. I mean, Britain goes to the world. Your American listeners may not realise, but whilst we were in the European Union, we weren't able to make trade deals with other countries outside of the European Union without EU approval. We can now do all of that. We can now go to the United States and have a trade deal that is just between Britain and America, and I think we'll get a far, far better deal for that reason. And all of the indications for the Trump administration is they're ready to go. They want that deal to happen as soon as possible. In fact, we're the ones that are sort of having to tell them to cool their heels because we've got to complete our process of leaving the European Union first.
And very important, actually, for the Trump administration as well, I think, it's one of those what we call easy wins. It's you talked a big game during the campaign about bilateral trade deals. You talk about bilateralism. You shun multilateralism. You shun globalism. So let's prove it. And like you say, it's not the Trump administration's fault that it hasn't happened yet. It's the British government's fault and the European Union's rules' fault that it hasn't happened yet. But you know what? If I was sitting there in the White House or if I was in the Trade Department or whatever, I'd just be picking up the phone to the British government every day going, are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? We've got a deal. Are we there yet? Because actually it works out best for everyone in the short run, right?
Well, absolutely, and that's the point of trade. I mean, we are going to have such a fantastic relationship with the United States, and it's very fortuitous that we have a president in Donald Trump who believes in Britain, who wants to get this trade deal done. Barack Obama was talking in terms of Britain going to the back of the queue. Well, Trump's came and said we're at the front of the queue. He's raring to go, and just imagine how fortunate we are to have a president of the United States that's knocking on our door and saying let's do a deal. I mean, there are going to be some wonderful things we can do in partnership with the United States in terms of our universities, in terms of people travelling between the two countries to work, and in terms of exchange of all of the wonderful things we do in the United Kingdom and the wonderful things that are going on in the United States. It's going to be a very exciting time, and it's going to benefit both countries hugely.
And Ben Harris-Quinney, thank you so much for joining us here on Breitbart News Daily. I was just thinking to myself, you often say that we don't see each other enough. You're over there, I'm over here. But then I realised it's not long now until our friends Ed and Meghan's wedding in Maine. So I shall probably see you there. Ben, thanks so much.